What is up, 7th grade? This is lesson 76. We're talking about complex fractions. Bum, bum, bum. Not only are they fractions, they're complex ones. But it's okay because a complex fraction is really just a fraction with fractions in it. So if there's a fraction in the numerator, the top, or if there's a fraction in the bottom, the denominator, then we call that a complex fraction. So these are some examples of this. Notice it's a fraction divided by a fraction, or a number with a fraction in it divided by another number. So this is a fraction in just the top. Number divided by a number with a fraction in it, or a fraction divided by a fraction. This just has a bunch of letters in it. This is really the same thing as this, right? So how are we going to solve this? Well, really, there's a couple different ways to solve this. And I'm going to show you both tricks here with this one, and then we'll kind of just use them interchangeably. So the first trick is to multiply this thing by a big number 1. Now remember, if I take any number and divide it by itself, like if I say 2 divided by 2, that's just 1, right? Or if I say pi divided by pi, that's going to equal to 1. And also, if I multiply any number, say 2 times 1, that's just still the same thing, 2, right? Those two match. So I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to multiply by a fraction over a fraction. And so as long as I put the same thing on the top and same thing on the bottom, it's going to be 1. Now what I'm going to pick to put here and here is going to be the inverse of this, or what we call the reciprocal. So the 3 over the 2. So this to be 3 over 2, and put the same thing on top, 3 over 2. Now notice I have 3 over 2 divided by 3 over 2. So that means this big thing is just a number 1. So multiply this number by 1, and so it's not going to change its value. Just like 2 multiplied by 1 still is 2. This number multiplied by 1 is still going to remain this number. We're just trying to simplify it to figure out what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to look on this bottom here. So we're going to multiply the bottoms and multiply the tops. So the bottoms is going to be 2 times 3 over 3 times 2. So it's going to be 6 over 6. So this is going to give us, on the bottom, it's going to be 6 over 6. On the top, it's going to be 2 times 3, which is 6, over 5 times 2. So it's going to be 6 over 10. Well, notice, what is 6 divided by 6? Well, that's just 1. So this whole thing is going to be 6 over 10 divided by 1. We know that any number divided by 1 is just itself. So this is just going to be 6 over 10. And of course we can reduce that. 2 goes into both of those. So the top is going to be 3 and the bottom is going to be 5. So the answer is going to be 3/5. Now a different way to look at this, I'm going to use a different color, is just to look at this right here and realize that that means the top divided by the bottom. So I'm going to write it just like that. I'm going to say 2/5 divided by 2/3. Isn't that what this means? 2/5 divided by 2/3. 2/5 divided by 2/3. So it means the same thing. And we know how to do this. We know the cool trick of just leaving the first one, 2/5, and then multiplying by the reciprocal of the second one, 3 over 2. So multiplying the top, that's going to give me 6 over 10. That looks pretty familiar. That's the same thing as 3/5. So either way, you get the same answer. So you can use either method that you want, but I kind of like the second one because I feel it's a little bit shorter and easier to remember. Also, I should note that if we wanted to, we could have reduced the 2 and the 2. 2 goes into 1. 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 2 one time, so it would have ended up with just 3/5 if we wanted to do that. Maybe it would have made our work a little easier, but it's up to you. So let's try another one. Now this one is a little bit different because I don't have a fraction over a fraction. I have something with a fraction in it. So the first thing we want to do is kind of just rewrite this as a fraction. So let's see if we can remember how to change mixed numbers into fractions, or into improper fractions. So if I have 25 and 2/3, remember we take the 3 and multiply by the 25. So that gives us 75. And then we add the numerator. So I'd say plus 2, which gives me 77. So my numerator, so it's going to be 77 over 3. The numerator is going to be 77, and the denominator stays the same there with that 3. So the top here is going to be 77 over 3, and then I'm going to go and write the denominator as a fraction as well. 100 divided by 1. Okay? So it's just the top one divided by the bottom one. So I'm going to say 77 over 3 divided by 100 over 1. That's the same thing as saying 77 over 3 times 1 over 100. That's going to give me 77 over 300. Okay, let's do that same thing again. Here I'm going to multiply 3 times 7, that's 21. Plus 1 more is going to give me 22. So this is going to be 22 over 3. That's the denominator. And the top I'm going to write as 15 over 1, just so we're used to that fraction over fraction. Because 15 divided by 1 is still just 15. So I can rewrite it like this, as 15 over 1 divided by 22 over 3. That's the same thing as 15 over 1 times the 3 over 22. And then we're going to multiply. 15 times 3 is going to be 45 over 22, because 1 times 22 is 22. And then we may as well go ahead and write that as a mixed number. 22 goes into that 2 times, so this is, I guess we can do this here. It's going to be 45 divided by 22. It doesn't go into 4, but it goes into 45 2 times. 2 times 22 is 44. Subtract and get 1. So it's 2 whole ones, right? And then I have 1 left over of the 22s. All right. One more here. It says change 83 1/3% to a fraction and simplify. So remember, if you had, let's say, 25%, that's the same thing as saying 25 over 100, right? Because percent is always comparing it to 100. You might also remember, like, oh, that's the same thing as 0.25, right? Remember, if you move the decimal place 2 to the left. Well, this is the same thing as 0.25. So those are going to be the same thing. So if you're remembering this, that's also true, same thing as that. So we can kind of take off the percent sign and write it over 100. So for here, I'm going to write this as 83 1/3 over 100. So now I've written it as a fraction, but we still need to simplify it. So the numerator is going to be 3 times 83. 83 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 8 is 24. So 249 plus that one more, so this is going to be 250 over 3 for the numerator. The denominator is going to be 100 over 1. So what we can do is now write this like this. 250 over 3. I'm going to skip a step. I'll write it here in just a second. Times the reciprocal of the bottom. 1 over the 100. So what I did is I said this is 250 over 3 divided by 100 over 1. If you still need to write this step, feel free. But then remember, when we're dividing by fraction, we can change it to multiplication and the reciprocal of that second one. And we get this. I'm going to go ahead and reduce because I noticed that 25, actually 50 will go into this and 50 will go into that. So I'm going to reduce here. 50 goes into that 2 times, whereas 50 goes into that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So on the top, I'm going to have 5 times 1, which is 5. On the bottom, I'm going to have 3 times 2, which is 6. So this reduces to 5/6. which is the same thing as 83 1/3%. Your homework starts on page 531. You're going to do all those practice set problems, all of them from lesson 76, from 75, and from 74, and then 8 random more ones from your choice. Good luck, guys.